A little girl asked her father one day what it was like in heaven, and the father answered, "It's a place of happiness and joy and peace. There's no sickness, there's no suffering, there's no more death. Such a wonderful place." He said, "It's a land of milk and honey." And she said, "What, no Coca-Cola?" It's kind of what they were doing in the gospel here today, saying, what, no marriage in heaven? It's a quandary. We all ask that question, what is it like in heaven? All we know is that, like St. Paul said, eye has not seen and ear has not heard what God has in store for those who love Him. It's something incredibly beyond our experience in this life. And so we can ask the question, and many a priest, including myself, have always been asked, Father, is there baseball in heaven? Is there beer in heaven? Is there automobiles? Is there a golf course? You know, all the things that we find such great pleasure in this life, we ask, is that in heaven? The answer is no. And the reason is because there's something even greater than that. The happiness that we can achieve in this life is nothing compared to the happiness and joy of eternal life in heaven with God. And that's something for us to really ponder. We're in the month of November, especially this past week, we had Feast of All Saints, the Feast of All Souls, our annual memorial mass for the deceased. I think I've celebrated 6 funerals in the past week or so. I got another one, so I was late for mass just before I came. Mark Mazanik passed away. I don't know if you know him, 61 years old, from the parish. So I don't know anything more than that. But and there's a funeral on Tuesday. So it's been a lot of death in the parish. And I'm reflecting on it a lot. Sometimes it gets a little too heavy. But when I think of what Jesus says here in the gospel, it makes it so much easier because it's the goal of life, to go from this world to the next world. That's the goal of life. And in the meantime, we have to do as Jesus asked us to do. The Jewish people in the Old Testament, in the book of Maccabees that we heard tonight, this mother and her 7 sons were being terribly tortured, cruelly tortured, because of their Jewish faith, but they would not give in. Their faith in God meant more to them than anything else. And these young men could say, you can kill my body, but you can't kill my soul. You can kill my body, but you cannot prevent me from rising from the dead as God promised. Even then they believed in the resurrection. And we marvel at their courage to die for their belief in God. And when we listen to St. Paul, too, that he says that we all we're called to do in this life is to love God above all things and our neighbor as ourselves. And if we do that as well as we can each day, we will find ourselves in heaven. The reason that there's no marriage in heaven, and we get worried about that, does that mean I'm not going to be with my husband or my wife when I get to heaven? No, it doesn't say that. It just says there won't be marriage because we won't need marriage in heaven. That is something we need on earth to propagate the human race, for husband and wife to help each other to get to heaven. But once we're there, where does it say in the gospel, somewhere in the scriptures, that the measure of our love for God is measured by our love for others? So the people that we love most intimately in this life, I absolutely believe, will be the first people that we'll encounter in heaven, because it was their love that showed us the love of God. And so we need not worry that we won't see our spouses or our children or our grandparents in heaven. We will, for sure. St. Augustine believed in his own way that people say, well, how old are we going to be when we rise from the dead? And are we going to be thin? Or are we going to be fat? Or what are we going to be like? St. Augustine believed that everybody would be 33 because that's how old Jesus was when he died, and that we would have this perfect body. And, so we can think about that as much as we want, but there's really no answer. All we know is that we will have a glorified body like Christ had. All we know is that somehow we will communicate with God and with one another in a way that we can't even do now. And we do know that we will be happy forever, and that will not be by being alone. It'll be with those we loved, and above all, being with God. And so the message today is just to be faithful to the Lord. And when we get to heaven, we're going to be very surprised, very, very surprised. And any joy we have on this earth is only a glimpse of the joy that we'll have in eternal life.